You're listening to Groundbreaking, where consulting meets innovation. Welcome back to Groundbreaking, where consulting meets innovation. My name is Sobh.
And I'm Peter Nabhan. Jad and I work for ECS group of companies, a nationwide engineering consulting firm.
Today, we have brought on two industry thought leaders offering their insights on professional development. I want to introduce our extraordinary thought leaders, Lauren Zangl and Mark Mochel. Lauren Zangl is a business development manager at ECS Group of Companies with a background in environmental science and business development. Her background in microbiology and environmental science positions her as a leader in environmental compliance and sustainable practices. Lauren actively contributes to industry innovation through her involvement in organizations like Urban Land Institute and Crew. Mark Mochel is a strategic account executive at Brightly, bringing more than 2 decades of expertise in process improvement, program management, and healthcare facility management. With leadership roles at organizations like ECS, Inc., Compliance Systems, and Facility Health, Mark has been recognized for his contributions as an associate member representative for 2025 American Society of Healthcare Engineers, ASH, Advisory Board. Welcome in, everybody.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Mark and Lauren. Appreciate you both taking the time to come and join us. And congratulations, Mark, on becoming the 2025 ASHI representative.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it, Peter.
Absolutely. And again, Jad, thank you so much for introducing both of our guests, telling us about their bio. I think now I just want to give you both the time to introduce yourself in a way that you like to. Lauren, we'll start with you, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
So my background, as Jad was saying, I'm environmental science. I have several degrees, most of them leading up to a career in environmental due diligence. So I tag myself as an environmental due diligence extraordinaire on LinkedIn. Basically, what that means is my technical background is included with my personality. I'm able to do business development pretty easily with talking clients through a complicated process on the spot. So I've started out as a project manager. I was doing project management for a year, started building in some business development, which I'll touch on a little bit later. And then that kind of just started taking over. And now I'm full-time business development, and I'm on several committees in the industry. I've been involved in a lot of professional development activities, including getting professional staff the confidence to get out there and do more professional development in the industry.
That's cool. Mark, can we hear from you?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I appreciate it. You covered a lot of it in the introduction. My current role in the industry, I'm very, very hyper-focused on infrastructure investment in the healthcare vertical, healthcare and senior living. And what excited me about this topic today is, professional development and how we expand our knowledge base, if you will. Prior to getting involved in healthcare in 2016, I worked in the automotive industry. I worked in the banking and finance industry a little bit. And what I found through all of those transitions is that all of those experiences, even though they were gained in other industries, they all translate into the work that I'm doing now. So academically, I have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, also have an MBA. So I've kind of seen a little bit of the technical side of consulting as well as the business side, which I think is very, very relevant to the topic that we're going to talk about today. So I appreciate you giving us a couple minutes to introduce ourselves.
Yeah, sure thing. And I love how both of you have a combination of consulting background, technical backgrounds, and also business acumen. So you're able to become that bridge to solve problems more effectively. So I think that's kind of a unique trait to have, and a lot of people in our industry would aspire to pursue that type of career track. So I think one of the first things that comes to mind when you're trying to get engaged with professional organizations is a lot of us are busy. We have our day-to-day jobs. We work for 40, 50, 60 hours. And I think a lot of people have a hard time finding inspiration to go out and maybe seek professional organizations or maybe join professional organizations. So I really want to hear your thoughts on how was it for you to find your inspiration to join, and what would you recommend for our listeners?
So the thing that's got me out into the industry the first time was, it's an old adage, but it's not what you know, it's who you know. And really, if you think about how your career advances, you get more and more specialized in, especially on the technical side, more and more specialized in a specific subset of your industry. So being able to, one, share that with industry partners, clients, that part of it will bring a lot of new business to yourself, which is part of advancing your career. And then you have to learn the soft skills of talking to someone, to the sales side. Then on the other side, it's everyone else is doing the same thing. Learning what everybody else knows is super important, because then you can do the reverse. And when you are stuck in a problem, you know who to go to. And this is internally and externally, as far as internal colleagues and external clients, industry partners. So having a big database helps with your being able to solve problems quickly and efficiently. And then just having conversations about a specific problem will probably lead into new projects that are coming down the line. And that's just how you build your career, with who you know.
And that you make a very good point. It sounds like you're getting out of your office, you're pushing your boundaries, you're trying to get uncomfortable so you can get out in the industry and understand the landscape. And that's essentially your why: is get out, meet people, learn how to do things differently, learn how to sell. And I think that's, from your perspective, that's a great perspective you shared, Lauren. And I would really like to hear what Mark has to say on that topic.
Yeah, I think we think about the inspiration, why join a professional organization or a membership organization? And it kind of cuts two ways. The first is, from my experience, especially working in multiple industries, that's where my customers are, so to speak. So there's, survival is a good motivator. And what I mean by that is the tactical view of this membership is that's where our network is. That's where the customers are. And as Lauren mentioned, that's where the, other industry experts are. So that's the place to be. I think going beyond that, the real inspiration for me is the more I've been engaged with professional memberships or, even trade shows or whatever you want to talk about, educational events, talking to folks outside of the work environment is usually when you can build the strongest relationships, because we all get to step away from the day-to-day, as you talked about, the busy, the phones ringing and all of that. But I've gotten the most networking done in an environment where everybody's kind of free from the tasks of the day. And that's when I've had some of the best conversations, some of the best learning opportunities, maybe when everybody gets to take a little bit of a breath. So we have to create that opportunity for ourselves. And I think that ultimately is the inspiration, because if we don't, we'll be consumed on a day-to-day basis by everything else that's coming at us. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. I really like how you framed it in a freedom kind of frameworks, like get out of your day-to-day. Your life is not just the work that you do on crunching numbers or putting reports together, or even in your case as an entrepreneur, creating a product, but it's also what you do outside of that and freeing yourself.
If you don't create that space, I think you get consumed, by the email and all that type of thing.
Absolutely. We can work on
We're
Excel.
all human beings.
Yep. We can be working on Excel the whole day and never get out of the office.
Peter, to add one comment to that, I think through the pandemic, we made a big move with all the teams and Zoom and all of that. And I think re-entering the membership space and almost learning again why it's so important to interact with peers and colleagues in a more natural environment. I think it's an important skill set we need to keep sharp.
Absolutely. This entire podcast would not have been possible, Mark, had I not met you at one of the ASHI conferences, for example.
Yeah,
it's definitely well worth it. And I do like the fact that, Lauren, you mentioned that earlier, that networking, unbelievably important. It's about who you know. And I really want to hear from both of you, from your perspective, when the engineers or the scientists or anyone in our industry goes out to do networking, a lot of times that's where it stops. Like there's no transition from networking to building a stronger bond, stronger relationship, maybe even developing into a mentorship type relationship. And because I feel like those relationships would be the ones that would help you give back to your community and give back in a stronger sense of the term. So what do you think from your perspective? What's a good way for our listeners or anybody who's interested to take it from that networking to the next level?
Yeah, I'll start, and then I'm curious to hear Lauren's thoughts as well. I think part of it's repetition, meaning if you join a membership or join an organization, go to one trade show or go to one educational event, you might get something out of it. But to me, the benefit of, like, in this case, the American Society of Healthcare Engineers, the repetitive engagement, and you meet 5 or 6 people or 10 people the first time, and then the next time you meet more, and it's very exponential in terms of getting introductions and so on. But at the end of the day, you get out of it what you put into it. And what I found is that if I go to a trade show, and I might see some folks that stay in the exhibition hall and don't take advantage of the educational sessions that might be going on. So you have to invest, and networking is not a one-way street, right? The value in these relationships has to come from both sides. And I have a lot of clients today that will call me and ask about a problem, and it's not a problem I can solve for them, but I know somebody who can. And that referral and that cross-pollination of skills, I think, is just extremely important. But it does take effort. Lauren, what do you think?
The repetition part of it is something that a lot of people miss, and it's a good thing to keep track of, especially for people just starting to enter the industry. I gave a talk a while back to some of our leadership here at ECS, and one of the things that I brought up was this rule of 7 touches. And basically what that means is when you meet someone, it's 7 touches to make any progress on the relationship, whether that's a sale, a referral, even just a project lead, anything like that. It takes 7 contacts with someone. So that could be just meeting them for the first time. Then that's a touch number 1. Connecting with them on LinkedIn is the second touch. Then there's sending them happy birthday when their notification pops up on LinkedIn that they have a birthday. Just any one of those types of contacts where your name is in their inbox on their screen and you're in front of them, that's a touch, and it takes 7 times. So that repetition is what makes a valuable relationship where they remember you. And then from there, that's when after 7 touches or so, sometimes it may take up to 21 touches, then you'll learn what that relationship actually is going to look like. So whether that you can evolve that into a mentorship, you can kind of start taking direction on asking for professional advice, asking for career advice, even a professional or a personal mentor that doesn't, like, you don't know until you continue to follow up constantly, keep people in front of you or stay in front of other people.
I like that, Lauren. If I can just add a quick comment. At the end of the day, the transition from networking to mentorship to me is all about trust and relationships. And we started out on this topic. I think we're probably going to hit it 6 more times. Networking is more than just trading business cards. It's trading ideas, building trust, building high integrity relationships where I can give somebody advice or I can receive advice from people that I know I can trust. Then that's where we take it to that next level. So I have contacts that I consider myself to be both a mentor and a mentee with the same person, depending on the subject at hand. So when you get to that point, you're just a phone call away from what could be a really important resource either way. So I really like that, Lauren, how you talked about the repetitive or reinforce that repetitive nature, because I think it's very, very true.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that this comes up, right? Because this will be, once this episode airs or publishes, this will be our 4th episode, right? This is now the 3rd out of those 4 episodes where mentorship has become like a very large talking point. And you just kind of, it's almost like one of those things where it just keeps coming up. So it must be pretty important for us to have that aspect of our professional careers, right? And so, Lauren, moving on, and Mark, obviously feel free to chime in on this one too. Many people are unaware of the skills that you can gain and certifications that some of these orgs offer. And you guys have both kind of alluded to it maybe a little bit. So do you guys care to elaborate a little bit more on that aspect of professional organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. The professional organizations getting involved, especially not just attending the open networking events, but getting involved on a committee, helping to plan events, helping with the policy changes if that's what the association or organization does. that helps build soft skills as far as remembering details that don't pertain necessarily to the specific expertise that you have sitting at your desk. Being able to talk to someone, being able to pick up the phone and make a cold call, even just interpersonal relationships. I mean, it's really what a lot of these associations and organizations are for. And having those soft skills is one of the most important things that you can develop if you want to advance your career. Think about the leaders in your company. They're all able to talk to anybody and everybody about everything. So to get to that point where you have to work at it and continue doing that. And so getting to the point where you can talk to people like this, it's just practice, and attending events is practice for building those soft skills. And I mean, there's a ton of different types of soft skills you can gain from these, getting involved in these associations. And it may be just someone's having a rough day and you just met them. It's being adaptable and helping them through a rough patch, even though you just met them. You can apply that to your colleague who's just had to put their pet down or something like that. Maybe it's just something you learn in the process. There's a lot of soft skills you can learn. As far as certifications go, I mean, there's the educational part of a lot of these associations is really important for ECS, for an example, ECS, attending the industry educational panels that a lot of our associations host for people. For the people in the industry, it's good to, even if it doesn't affect your daily job, it's the learning where the industry is going, where the trends are, hearing the problems that are coming up for our colleagues who may be further up the pipeline, and we're going to deal with this project in a couple months. They may be highlighting these issues on these panels. So the certifications can come through with PDHs. There's this engineering specific ones, which I believe ASH is one of them, that provides the PDHs, continuing education credits. There are a bunch of different names for them. And then also there's as far as other ways to get like softer certifications, I guess you can call them. LinkedIn is a good way to get these soft skills. LinkedIn Learning is a really valuable resource, similar to what LinkedIn Learning, which is probably the most accessible to a lot of people. Associations like Urban Land Institute, ULI, NAOP, they have databases of courses that you can take just in your free time that are basically university level classes that may be able to teach you something, and you can get a certification from it, but you could be learning something about what your client is doing. And if you learn what your client is doing on a daily basis, that may be able to help you problem solve for your client, which makes you a better industry partner.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, in some cases, credentialing is a necessity to do business. And, talking about the healthcare industry in particular, and ASHI's certified healthcare facility manager, certified healthcare constructor, it's not a requirement per se to work in the industry, but it certainly has a huge street cred, if you will. In some cases, for me personally, it was twofold. One, I was new to the industry. I was new to the healthcare industry just 10 years ago. So I had to get up to speed pretty quickly on some of the specific code and compliance requirements. And then the second thing on credentialing, I just assumed for a long time that a certified healthcare facility manager, that you had to be an owner, meaning you had to work in a hospital setting. So I inquired, and come to find out, as a vendor partner in the industry, I'm also eligible to receive that certification. And I had to make the investment of time and resources to do that. But it really rounded out my skill set, because it gave me an appreciation for all of the things that my customers have to deal with, not just those things that I'm mostly engaged in. So I don't think we can emphasize enough the importance of education, because, to Lauren's point, to me, it's about credibility. It's about not the credential, but the credibility that comes with the credential that can make us trusted advisors to our customers. So great topic.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing that. And the one thing that always comes to mind when I think about the credential is not necessarily the letters, but the process, the educational process that you have to go through to get the credentials. And there's unbelievable amount of knowledge. I'm just that person that's very passionate about continuous learning. And I think it's great that organizations do have those path to, just like you said, certified health constructor, CHS with ASHI or others. So absolutely crucial thing. That's very helpful.
Great stuff. I mean, and so we've kind of hit on developing those soft skills or maybe getting some of those certifications, kind of maybe going from there, evolving into a mentor. And through your time spent with these organizations, it opens up the door to serving a wider community, right? And so we'll start with Mark and then obviously Lauren. We would love to hear your thoughts. In your experience, guys, what are some of the key leadership traits you've seen people develop, through their involvement in these different organizations?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to throw a couple of weird ones at you. Humility in some cases, honesty, integrity. These are character traits as much as leadership traits. But what I found, and again, I'm using my example of entering a new industry at a relatively late stage in my career, I didn't lack confidence to engage in business topics and to engage with my potential customers. But I didn't have the skill set. And so I learned very quickly, if I don't know the answer to something, don't make something up. Be honest about what you know, in my case, what I know and what I don't know. I learned very quickly to be very, very transparent about that. And then ask for guidance. So I think from a leadership perspective, a leader that thinks that he or she knows everything is a dangerous leader. I just kind of be blunt about that. I think being confident in what you know and being willing to delegate and or reach out and ask for help. Some of my current customers are also some of my best mentors. I can call them at any time and say, hey, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think? And they'll tell me, yeah, that's great, or yeah, it is crazy. But again, I come back to integrity, humility, and honesty. And trust. That's the framework of any person, whether they're a leader or in a quote unquote lower position in the organization. Treat everybody with respect and be honest in those engagements, and it'll take you a long way.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, what I've seen the people evolve with their leadership skills through associations, there's kind of two things really. One, just to kind of summarize everything that Mark just said, is something that it's a buzzword, but authenticity. So that's the honesty, that's being true to yourself, being true to your clients, being true to your background. A lot of people have the imposter syndrome when they start engaging in community outside of their daily jobs. So it takes a time to build that authenticity, but it's something that's super important to develop your career, especially more towards the management side. You need to be authentic. Otherwise, you're not going to get the trust and you're not going to get promoted. The other thing I would say is just like it's a little bit more tangible, but it's the organizational skills. So if you start getting involved in the committees that they're a member of these associations, you need to be organized to remember to follow up, set up the next meeting, follow through on the action items, contact people for setting up an event in 3 months, whatever the case may be. You have to be organized and delegate. Really, that develops the leadership skills in kind of a little bit more less pressure type of way, but it's an important skill to have.
To me, it sounds like organizations do allow you to basically work out your authenticity muscle because you're trying to build trust with an ecosystem. And Mark, in your case, you were new to the industry, and within 10 years now, you're representing a big chunk of the industry. So that's quite the achievement. I'm happy to see it. And I'm happy to see you have a very successful recipe of achieving that by being authentic, by being transparent, and by always saying what you know and what you don't know. And I think that's very important.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we're always talking about recently is all these new trends. So everybody's talking about AI, sustainability. How can we have better work-life balance? And these are all things that if we're just existing in our own vacuum, we probably don't get much visibility on. And personally, I feel like organizations probably play a big role in that. So I think that's one of the topics I'd like to learn from you based on your organizational involvement. How have you seen that continuous innovation trend kept up in organizations? Maybe Mark, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think again, it's a double-edged sword. The innovation is happening so fast, and we're all trying to keep up with it. I have seen in recent years more and more educational sessions geared towards, you mentioned AI. It's all over the place, but we don't really know what it means yet or how we can apply it. So I think for me, seeing what's coming down the pike, so to speak, it's always interesting to see that. I would never get access to that unless I just went out and started Googling it. What I enjoy the most, though, is the conversations after these sessions. So when I see a session that talks about possible uses of, and we'll just use AI because I think that's front and center, possible uses for AI in healthcare. Well, there's a million different things. Some of them are clinical, some of them are not, and so on and so forth. But it's the conversation afterwards where we're all sitting around scratching our head. What does this mean today? How do I apply this today? So, what's the phrase? Always swim with a buddy. At a minimum, it helps me to digest all of this new stuff in a setting where I can maybe ask questions or articulate and just figure out what's everybody else thinking about this, because I'm confused, right? That's the only place that I'm seeing it in an organized fashion where we can really digest not only what some of this new innovation is, but how are we going to implement this? I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope it does.
It absolutely does. It sounds like it gave you a safe space to discuss with maybe folks with different backgrounds, but also with a similar interest or similar type industry. And you can essentially scratch your head afterwards and, okay, this is what we learned. This is how it's going to impact me. And this is maybe where the trend's is headed moving forward. So that's definitely a very good observation. And I'd like to hear, Lauren, maybe from you, if AI has been the main topics in the organizations that you engage with, or it's been something else.
Well, I mean, I guess I can go anything, but I've gotten using like the AI trend, even just there's some climate change stuff that's been on my radar a lot more recently, just because I'm an environmental scientist. But to Mark's point about having the conversations after an educational panel, that helps the technical staff, even me, former technical person, to figure out how that fits into my job and how I can use that information to implement the innovation into my daily job and be a value add for my clients. So if they're already thinking about it on their end, where they're talking about like I have a client on the panel, they're talking about whatever this is, but we are not necessarily touching it yet. But if they're talking about it, I can have the follow-up conversations either with someone else in the industry or with them specifically and be like, well, are you guys applying this across the board? Would it be beneficial for us as a company to start implementing some of these policies or thoughts or something, whatever the topic is? It helps to kind of create an edge for yourself that you are informed, you're paying attention to the industry, you're paying attention to your clients and your friends and your industry peers. It just helps, going back to the beginning, it just helps the whole system of, I know things and I can be a resource for my clients. It helps all of it just to stay in the front edge of some of these innovations in the industry and to help implement innovations internally.
And I'll add another side of innovate. Doesn't sound innovative, but probably the biggest thing that also comes along with this is, in many cases, this innovation is outstripping the regulatory environment that we're living in. So again, I tie back to healthcare. We're still living under compliance and regulatory code that was written decades ago in some cases. And so even though we've got these new things coming at us, we're also living in a world where we have to interpret those within the guidelines that we're facing today. And I think that ties into everything we've talked about here, which is, how do I decipher this? Is this going to impact me today in my role? Is it going to impact me next year? But the only way to stay in front of that is to stay educated. So, and code and compliance is not typically innovative, but we have to deal with it anyway, right? Because it can have the same type of impact.
That's true. It's given a lot of space, Mark, on what you just said, for thought leaders to be involved in the update of compliance and codes and that framework that's maybe outdated now with all the technology that we've had. When they put those codes together, we had probably no computers, no AI, none of the things that
Certainly nothing like what we have today.
Absolutely. Maybe some computers do that old.
Yeah. Well, I think of innovation is it's an idea, right? And then there has to be a passion behind that, but there also has to be execution. And I think that's where, as consultants, that's where we earn our pay, so to speak, which is how do I take this idea and how do we get it to the point of execution where it's actually generating some type of business value for the client? And I'm sure Lauren would agree. We're helping lead our clients on a journey. There may or may not be a discrete outcome, but that execution piece is that's what we're trying to figure out with AI, for example. Okay, it's a great idea. It works great, does this. How do I execute that in a way that's sustainable, compliant, and generates value for the end client? And that's called consulting, right? How do we make this real?
Right. Valuable insight from everybody for sure. I mean, it's professional organizations, like we said, that's where those conversations can happen very freely, and it's a wonderful thing. So we're going to pivot just a little bit. So for both of you, reflecting on your careers from a professional development and like your leadership journey perspectives, what strikes you as defining moments in your career, and what pieces of advice can you give to our listeners about advancing in those realms?
Yeah, I'll start. I think, we talked about this National Advisory Board position with the American Society of Healthcare Engineers, and I'm very proud of it personally and professionally. But the defining moment, as Peter mentioned, I was just elected by the membership to serve at the national level in the organization. That was the defining result. The defining moment was 3 years ago when I decided that I was going to run. So this was my third year running for the position. Obviously, the first two times it didn't assume the position, but that journey was so remarkable for me. I was pretty naive the first year. I learned a lot going through the process. I ended up meeting a lot of people. And so it took time to get there. And I even tell my kids, who are young adults entering their professional careers, you got to play the long ball. Not everything is going to happen the way you want it the first time, or maybe not the second time in my case, but perseverance was a key part of it. But I'm going to go right back to where we started. You get out of it what you put into it. And for me, it was an investment of time and energy and education and networking and relationships and all of those things that culminated in a success. But the journey that I took to get there was as rewarding, if not more rewarding, than actually getting the win, so to speak, because I'm a much different person now in this industry, in the healthcare industry. I'm a much different person than I was just 3 years ago. And part of it was because of that investment that I made. So that would be my advice. If you join a professional organization just to get a quick win, you're not going to get the benefits of the organization that you might if you play the long ball and plant those seeds and build those relationships that are going to pay dividends years down the road. So stay with it. What did we say at the beginning? Be persistent and repetition. Stay engaged so you get all the benefits.
For me, I'll kind of have, I'll say probably two main defining points that have gotten me here today. Both of them came from my time prior to ECS, but also actively involved the fact that I started doing business development. At the time, I was working for a smaller environmental firm, just one-stop shop in Chicago. It was a great job. I really enjoyed it. A couple years into that, after I had started building a network through industry associations and attending events and becoming known as quote unquote the environmental person, because I was able to have the complicated conversations with them as a project manager, or with clients, I should say. The leadership of the company started recognizing that, and started having conversations about promoting me into a pretty high leadership at that point. It was early and I was kind of shocked by these conversations, but it was one of those, and it didn't pan out. Obviously, I'm here at ECS and I love it. I would not change anything about it. But at the time, I appreciated those conversations because they kind of gave me an external feedback on what I'm doing is right. The connections that I'm making are valuable to the company, and they see that and they want to recognize that and acknowledge it. So that kind of changed my perspective of like, keep pursuing this, keep going down that road. And I did, and I loved it. And it's why I'm full-time business development now rather than project management. I miss the project management, but I love the business development side. And then the other thing happened during the pandemic, actually. This was really a pivotal point for a lot of people's careers because the industry wasn't doing any networking events. Everything was virtual. No one knew how to navigate the industry through a screen at the time. There had been some associations that tried to do some networking stuff virtually, and it was clumsy and awkward, and it was rough. It was really rough. So a few weeks into the pandemic, I decided to use my network and innovate, and kind of using my technical background, break down what is a networking event. And I was able to kind of create this whole networking thing using my company in the different types of, and this is valid for ECS as well, that all of the broad range of clients that we can work with, from the environmental, the GCs, the attorneys, like all the way through the entire life cycle of projects, we have a huge network. We're kind of felt like we were the center point. So I did that, and I became very well known because of that. I got a lot of work out of it. I got a lot of new relationships, a lot of existing clients that were strengthened, the relationships that were super strong. And it was a lot of touch points. It was going back to the rule of 7. They were getting these posts, the notifications on LinkedIn. They were seeing me twice a week. They were getting the follow-up emails from me. I had multiple touch points very, very easily. And that definitely, coming out of the pandemic, I still to this day, I get recognized like, oh yeah, you had the networking events during the pandemic. They were great. And I give that whole story just because I was able to innovate. I was able to be creative to create value for my clients. So those are kind of the 2 points. One kind of was a little bit more internal, and the other one was a little bit more external focus. But those were kind of the 2 main highlights of my career so far. I mean, obviously I've had some cool stuff that's happened since then, but those are kind of my 2 proud defining moments.
Well, we're kind of saying the same thing in different ways, Lauren. To me, it was validation, which is important, right? For any of us as consultants to feel like we're creating value for our customers. And yes, there's the commercial side, but I'm focusing on the relationship and helping them solve problems and so on and so forth. But that requires validation as well. And so when we achieve and Lauren, you were validated in the work that you did. You probably didn't know it at the time, right? But 2 years down the road, people are looking back to something you did in the past, and it's now creating a foundation for your whatever the next level of consulting is. So I think we're hitting on a lot of the same topics here. And I love this conversation because a good friend of mine years ago, or a mentor as well, he said, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I've always remembered that, because whether it's a professional group or whether it's our companies or a professional organization, it's 1 + 1 = 3. If everybody puts in as much as they try to take out, then everybody gets stronger. So I love this conversation. I appreciate the chance to have it.
Spot on, Mark. Spot on. Well, very well said. And I appreciate you sharing your perspective. And of course, Lauren, unbelievably creative what you did during the pandemic. But Jad's gonna take us home after this one, but we try to end it with one last question. So this is a question we ask of all of our guests. Can you share something with our listeners that's been groundbreaking for you? And this could be personal or professional. And Lauren, I'm gonna start with you.
Ooh, something that's been groundbreaking for me, I would have to kind of revert back to one of the last situations I just mentioned about the validation for being in a leadership position and using my experience for that. When I moved from our Chicago office to our Chantilly office, the headquarters office, one of the things that I really saw where I saw a place for myself was the ability to use my skills from networking to create culture internally. And without going into too many details about it, but I've been kind of creating some programs and incentive stuff to get my colleagues more excited about getting back into business development activities and using their professional expertise to get out and build their own personal brand. So my groundbreaking thing is definitely like, there's a lot of different ways to take business development and a lot of different ways to do business development, but the trends are professional growth is behind business development always.
I like how involved you are in your teammates' careers and them amplifying their impact.
I love watching younger staff grow and become the higher managers. Like, it's always very exciting to see that.
That's excellent. That's very cool. Mark?
Yeah. So kind of along the same lines, I'll start out by saying, this gray hair didn't come cheap. So, but this is a moment that happened just within the last 6 months. My wife and I have 4 young adult children. So our youngest just started his freshman year in college. My daughter just graduated from college and so on. And we've got 2 other boys that are off doing their thing. And my daughter was she had to make a pretty big decision when she graduated. Did she want to go on to graduate school? Did she want to move across the country, take this certain job? And I said, well, here's what I think you should do, but I don't know the answer. Because it was this moment where I'm watching my kids now become adults and there is no playbook anymore, and what my daughter said was very profound. And she said, I was talking to Alex, our brother, and we realized this is your first time going through life as well. And I'm just hold that moment right there. And that's what I said to her. It is my first time too. I've never been the father of, a daughter who's graduating college and moving off to the West Coast. So my point in all this is it reminded me that it's okay, that I'm still trying to figure this out too, right? I said, I'm just 30 years ahead of you when I'm talking to my daughter. And I think it's very relevant to this topic because there is no single playbook. There is no single answer. I've always tried to just teach my kids, create opportunities for yourself without even knowing where's this road going to lead. And I try to remember it myself, even at my age now of I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years. I don't know, what's going to happen in the world. And so I bring it back to this networking and making sure that, none of us can do this by ourselves. We have to continue to learn, network, ask, et cetera, and engage, because I think it's, tomorrow's a new day for all of us, right? And we don't know what's in store. So anyway, little philosophical there, but it was a huge moment for me because I realized it's not about me anymore. Now my kids are starting their careers and they're going to go through all the same types of things that I did, and they're going to have to figure it out. And boy, is it scary, but boy, is it beautiful all at the same time. So anyway, deep thoughts by Mark. How about that?
That's a very nice dad moment, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely love it.
Cool.
Well, to kind of wrap things up here, thank you, Lauren and Mark, for everything today. I think this was an extremely valuable, podcast that's going to be put out for our listeners and just everybody. So to wrap it up, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thanks for listening to Groundbreaking, where consulting meets innovation.
This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Nothing herein shall be construed as providing professional engineering services or used to establish the standard of care. This podcast and the comments contained therein represent only the personal views of participants and do not reflect those of ECS. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors.